Welcome back to the third part in our series of Playful Learning with Media. I'm joined again by John Sessler, and we're going to dive in and tackle the final buckets of Playful Learning with Media. So what are we talking about today, John?
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you again. And today we're talking about documenting and sharing with media. But let's do a quick recap of some of the concepts that we've explored through this series, beginning with this idea of playful learning. So what is playful learning? And I have this quote again from Kathy Hirsch-Pasek and Roberta Michnik-Galinkoff. Really, playful learning in their terminology is that intersection of the free play and the guided play, thinking about play as this holistic, whole child approach. But then really the learners are able to explore their curiosities and kind of be guided by their interests and their questions in terms of how they explore the environment and the materials that you provide as part of this playful experience. And then we talked about this connection to the connected learning approach. Really, the core concepts around connected learning are this idea that we're supporting learners to make connections across content subject areas, engaging learners in a combination of traditional text and digital media that ranges from, of course, printed text to images to apps and video content, really to take advantage of that full range of learning pathways, and then providing opportunities for learners to really explore their passions, their interests and curiosity, bringing new opportunities for learners to maybe have access to folks in the field through Skype or Hangouts, and then finding ways to extend that learning beyond the classroom environment into the home environment, into the community. How are learners continuing to think about these core concepts and topics of interest from the classroom into their daily lives back at home. So we have sort of an equation, a recipe for what this looks like, really beginning with the content. And we've explored in our other webcast content that really lend itself to these playful learning experiences, but
Right.
starting with that foundation of the content and taking into account the authentic experiences, students' interests, and those pieces kind of flow throughout this equation. So starting with the content, moving into the intentional integration of the media and technology, ensuring again that it connects to students' passions and interests. They have the opportunity to make the choices of what tools they might be using. That voice and choice is very important, I think, to all elements of this equation. And then at the top there, we have the hands-on exploration. And last webcast, we really explored that with the create approach, the explore and create approaches. And then again, how do we weave these ideas of the connected learning concepts of student curiosity, student passion, students' interests, really driving that learning, really giving them the opportunity to play with these ideas, to play with the media, and to explore the content at a deeper level. So those three topics, from the content to the intentional media and technology integration to the hands-on exploration, really connect to this broader idea of the playful and connected learning approaches that we bring into the classroom.
That's a great reminder of just the power of play. And we've said this in each video, that idea that play can be frowned upon. It can be almost a dirty word. And I'm excited that we're reclaiming the idea of play.
I love that idea of reclaiming play and reframing it too. Not just thinking of play in terms of how our early learners learn best, which we know is through play, but that play should be an opportunity to kind of embed these experiences from K through 12th grade and beyond. And I think that's a great segue into the how. And our first webcast explored using media and technology to help spark and model concepts the ways that you're interacting with that clip should be similar to how you would interact with printed text or with images, and how we're questioning the content. It's sparking new ways to think about the content. You're bringing in different perspectives when we have video content versus still images versus printed text. So just different ways to think about media to spark and model. And then we went into this idea that media is an opportunity to explore and create. So to go deeper with the media, to kind of inspire research or new questions that might take you down different pathways. And that could take our learners into a whole new exploration of a topic that maybe you didn't even really identify as an initial learning goal, but because it's guided by the learner's interest, media has allowed for that exploration at a deeper level. And then opportunities for learners to create with media. And we talked in our last webcast about a lot of the non-digital opportunities for creation that are inspired by media. And then also even ways for children to create their own media through different tools and apps. Today, we're going to talk about this idea of using media and digital tools, technology for documenting and sharing. Document is a way for digital tools to be used to capture and document the learning experiences as they are happening. They can support the reflection, connection making, communication, a show what you know opportunity for learners to use a digital tool in a really authentic way. And then this idea of using technology to share out. Digital tools can be used to engage that two-way communication with learners and families. And maybe we have talked about this, Darcy, even between teachers in the school community or between teachers and students to share out information. So going beyond the boundaries of the classroom and thinking how technology really allows for that communication outside the walls of the classroom. And so that brings me to just a number of different tools. I brought our first tool up during our Explore and Creation webcast, Scratch Junior, which is a PBS Kids app, uses the Scratch platform, which is a coding platform, but then the PBS Kids version embeds PBS characters and scenery that kids would see in the PBS shows, so kids can document their stories, or they could extend some of the concepts that they're being introduced to in their classroom and create and show what they know through the Scratch Junior app. So that's just one way that, again, some of these different approaches will bleed into one another. I do see that creation approach kind of bleeding into this documenting and sharing. But this Scratch...
Right, because as they're creating that information, they're documenting for us as teachers their understanding of that. Exactly. And so depending on how you as a teacher use that, is the Scratch Junior being used as a tool for them to create, and is that part of the learning process? Or is that what you are actually assessing them on?
And the infographic that you just saw, that Darcy and I had so much fun and had that playful learning opportunity to design, is through Canva, which is that one there in the lower part of your screen. Canva is a very easy way for students and for adults even to create simple infographics. They can even collaborate and edit. Not at the same time, but it is a good way to share out what the creation that they've made, and they can work together to create something.
And Canva has a lot of simple designs and templates. So you can have a conversation about designing things for social media. Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook has a great Instagram template for Google Slides, but you could create the same type of thing in PowerPoint. Use something like Canva, have the students create an Instagram post, and then each student post that creation into your slide deck. And now you have in your classroom this scrolling Instagram feed about fill in the blank for whatever content or whatever media that you've been looking at. Now students are creating their own media. And that could be a way, we've been talking about how all of these things overlap. As students are creating that media and documenting their understanding, it can be a way to go back and reteach other concepts, because depending on what the students are doing. So Canva is a great way. Obviously, you can create posters without a computer. I don't know if I think we forget that sometimes, but as a high school teacher, I'm always amazed at what happens when you hand a group of high school students a bucket of crayons and a stack of paper. And so even though we're talking about these digital tools and creating media, remember, you can do this with whatever. So maybe it's giant pieces of butcher paper that then you're going to display, and that takes us into that next. We'll talk about sharing in a moment, but maybe it's just making posters. So yes, you can design the infographics on a computer, but you can also create these things just with what the kids have on hand. You can create 3D models of their learning and create dioramas of things that are hands-on, as well as those virtual creations.
That's such an important point, Darcy, because I think it's easy to forget that and get kind of sidetracked by the big shiny object of tech. Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to forget kind of the joyful experiences we had as learners back in the days when we didn't have all these tools. And right. I think it's really important to remember to keep that in mind when you are choosing a tool. Does it really have a function that's going to alter the way that students will be documenting their knowledge or creating with it?
Enhancing the process?
Enhancing the process, yeah. Correct.
Sometimes a digital tool can make it so that you're actually assessing the student's use of the tool. So if a student is using Canva and being assessed on how they were able to document their learning through Canva, you need to make sure that that's the third, maybe even the fourth time that they've been exposed to Canva, if you're actually using that as an assessment, because we want to make sure we're assessing the learning, that content, those objectives, those things that back on our infographic were that bottom foundational layer, not how well does the kid know how to use Scratch Junior? How well does the kid know how to use Canva? And part of that might be guided, and we'll come back to these other tools, but this, I think we're just segueing into thinking about how is this being shared? Because yes, that might change what tool you're using and how that creation, how that documentation is being assessed.
We think about sharing out as a way perhaps to engage families or extend the learning outside of the walls of the classroom. But really, even sharing our thinking through something as simple as a Google document, you know, and sure, within the classroom community, you know, using a Google document or something like Padlet to share questions as they arise, and especially for, you know, again, bleeding from document into sharing, but learners documenting the questions perhaps as they're watching a video clip and using a tool like Google Documents or Padlet as a landing place for those questions. And then that becomes kind of a curated place for the students to come back to continue, you know, exploring the questions and to continue to engage in that inquiry process through what they documented on Padlet or Google Docs. But then, you know, we think about too, how are we sharing from the teacher, from your perspective, to the home environment and to families. So how are you sharing out the resources that you're introducing to your students in the classroom? Remind, for example, is a really a great tool for sharing out content that you're using in the classroom. Remind is also connected to the PBS learning media resources, for example.
And while you're pulling that up, for those of you who haven't used Remind, as with everything that I share, like I said, it's free. But I loved Remind as a high school teacher because it's a text-based program. So I could set up reminders on my computer, but it would send a text message, not an email, to anyone who had signed up for my Remind account. And so I have a little code so parents could sign up for it, students could sign up for it, but then it sends short texts. And I love it because you can program your messages ahead of time for conferences, for whatever, and then they just automatically go out and you can always edit those as a teacher. So it's just a powerful tool to be connecting with people in a way that is perhaps more convenient for some parents, for some users, than an email might be.
That's right, and very simple to use. As you'll see, it's
Right.
connected, as I mentioned, through PBS Learning Media. When you're on a resource such as this one, you can click on Share and Assign. You'll see the options for sharing out this piece of media. We have tools within PBS Learning Media that allow you to assign it to students. We have Google Classroom that makes it very easy to share out, but then here is the Remind button. So if we click on Remind, and so then Remind pops up after you've clicked the Remind button in PBS Learning Media.
Ooh, and the link is just right there.
It's right there. It's right in the text box. You can translate this. You can add more text. Maybe some prompts for viewing if you're sending it off to parents or students. And
ooh, so your reminders, we talked last time about when we're watching videos, how to pause them and ask questions with our learners. You could, in this text to parents, add a couple bullet points. Today we talked about X.
Exactly.
Here's a video to review with your learner and ask them 2 questions so that we're giving guardians the tools to really help extend the learning day at home.
That's exactly right, Darcy. And I see it as such an easy tool for those conversations to extend beyond the classroom. And, you know, helping to support families with those times at the dinner table or when they're in the car and we ask, what did you do today in school? Well, here is some fodder for those conversations that you can send out as a teacher. And again, like you said, put some questions in there, put some discussion starters for how you integrated it, that resource into the classroom, or maybe it's a new resource that extends beyond what you just introduced that day in the classroom. So
yeah, that next step.
And, you know, it goes beyond Remind, to even going back to some of those tools that I mentioned as very simple ways to document and share out learning in the walls of the classroom with, say, Google Docs or Padlet. I heard of one teacher that used Padlet, and if you're not familiar with Padlet, it really is just an online like Pinterest type board, or like a cork board where you can pin conversations, you can have little discussions happening. And a teacher used it in a way that she had her students go home that night and take pictures of their environment at home or outside. It was a lesson on properties of materials. And so they took different images of different materials and the different properties that they had. And then the students, with the help of their families, uploaded those images into Padlet. So they had this curated board of all the images from the children's homes environments, and that's what they brought back into the school. So it's that two-way communication again, not just as an opportunity to share out what's happening at the classroom, but for, you know, kind of flip the homework on its head and say, you know, here's a digital tool that we can use. And, you know, we know that your learners are coming from different environments where they have different access to technology. It could be an opportunity for them to draw the materials, to draw images of what they see around them. They could bring those images, and then you as your teacher could take photos of that and upload on the Padlet board too.
And like you said, opening up that communication and extending that community, because we want to think about how can students share what they're learning with each other, how can they share within the greater school environment, but this is all about also how do we share with parents so they're just more engaged and connected, because that's going to help the kids, it's going to help the school community, it's going to help those parents, those guardians feel more connected and just in the know of what's going on with their learner.
And you all may be familiar with some of these other tools that we have listed here, but Seesaw, Class Dojo, great opportunities embedded in those apps for the documenting approach and sharing out information too with the learners and with parents. And then Flipgrid as well. If you have not used Flipgrid, a great video tool for documenting the learning and sharing it out.
Flipgrid is so multifaceted. I would say if you're looking for one way to document and share and you're not sure where to start, Flipgrid is just so simple and it allows you to do all kinds of great things. So great for student reflections, for them to document what they're using. You could use Flipgrid as a tool at every single stage of these buckets that we've been talking about. You could use Flipgrid to spark a conversation by posing a question. What do you already know about X? Or what have you heard about? And have the students respond to that, and then use those to spark a deeper inquiry and like take the students onto that journey. You could use Flipgrid for students to model for each other different techniques, different learning experiences. You can use them, it could be like that they give little reports so that they're taking and they're creating a learning experience for each other. You can even make a mixed tape, basically. And so for me as a child of the 80s, I did make mixed tapes on actual tapes. You can make a mixtape type concept where you link together different videos. Students can respond to each other in video. So I can post a video, John can watch that video, and he can respond to me in video. So we can have we could deepen our experience about learning. And obviously through all of those things, a math teacher friend of mine uses it and has the students do math problems and then use Flipgrid to explain how they got their answer. So they're documenting not just their answer and their outcome, but they're documenting their thinking. And she said it's been so great because now again, she has all of those student videos of them saying, all right, so this is what I did. And now she can take any one of those students explaining that math concept and use it to model for other students that math concept and that math thinking. You could also get a QR code for any of those videos. So back to that sharing with the greater community, you could create an interactive bulletin board out in the hallway where you have different graphics, maybe hand-drawn pictures, maybe some 3D models that students have built, but there's a QR code on them. And when you scan the QR code, it takes someone to the Flipgrid video of the student providing an explanation of their creation and what they've done. So if there's one, I know I just did a commercial for Flipgrid, but really if there's one tool that you try out and you try integrating into your teacher toolkit, Flipgrid is a great one, because I hope that I've just expressed that you can use it for anything. So I've used it to have for high school students to create news broadcasts as their chapter summaries when reading Animal Farm. So for each chapter, they had to pick a different, they had to either do a news, weather, sports, or like feature, like personal interview type story. So they had 4 different types of tasks. And for each chapter, they had to do a 1.5-minute summary. And so then again, by having all of these different students, and you can have them work in pairs, you can do whatever, but we would have all of these different perspectives of the chapter that we could then use to explore and have our conversations.
Right.
The possibilities are endless.
And that's the beauty of all the tools that we have listed here. I know all of you have a slew of others that you have used, but they really connect that idea of documenting and sharing. You can do both with most of these tools. So I think find the one that works best for you if you're new to using media for these purposes and technology for these purposes, and stick with it. And if it's not working, find a new one. So
that's a great general tip. Like, find one tool and then figure out how to use it 14 different ways. You want to make sure the kids know how to use the tech tool so that they're no longer thinking about the tech. They're just focusing on the content.
Right.
So I think there's an advantage of picking 2 or 3 tools and then make them your flexible utility knives for creation, for documenting and sharing in the classroom.
What a great analogy, a flexible utility knife. And I think that's a nice segue here as we round out this series of webcasts, thinking about the different media integration approaches. And really it comes down to this idea of providing opportunities for children to play and for students to play, of course, as we have really connected throughout all of these, but then also for students to practice those media literacy skills. And really, I love this quote from Faith Rogow. Dr. Faith Rogow is a media literacy strategist, innovator, researcher, and it does come down to this. The goal of media literacy education isn't technology use, it's to prepare children to thrive in a media and technology rich world. And we've highlighted a couple other aspects of that quote. It's really about the sound pedagogy and learning, and what do we want children to learn? It needs to be that question that we keep in the front of our mind as we're choosing the tools, as we're developing our lessons that are going to integrate the technology and media. It really comes to those best practices that you're using every day, and not to get sidetracked by the bright, shiny object of technology and media. But I really love this quote in thinking about really at the core, we are teaching those media literacy skills and providing children with the skills that when they are out in the world, in this media rich world, they have the problem solving skills, they have the creative thinking skills to choose the right resources to express themselves, or to create with, or to do a job that they need to get done. And
to navigate through those things. This is helping them be able to read and navigate all types of media, all types of text, from video to essays to storybooks to songs and graphic images. This is about helping them learn all of those things. But at the heart of it, what do we want students to learn? And we let that question drive everything else that we're creating, and those experiences, those playful and connected experiences that we're setting up.
if we can do all of that in playful ways and in ways that are going to connect students to their interests, their curiosities, to their cultural context back at their home, we have really succeeded in our outcomes for our students.
Well, thank you, John, for sharing that reminder, that great goal for all of us as educators. And thanks for sharing these tools and these tips for how do we create these playful learning experiences.